Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Or, excuse me, good afternoon. It's 3:44 p.m. my time in Costa Rica. And that is, of course, Mountain Time, which at present is is exactly 2 hours behind Eastern Standard Time. Which is my pivot point for time, right? Because I was raised in Eastern Standard Time. I don't want people to think I'm New York or Toronto centric or Northeast centric. I haven't lived there for a decade now. Now, today we're going to get back along with the 1947 chapter, and we talked about Roswell. We talked about interview with the alien interview, which was not published until 2008, and which I believe is credible. Now, I have my reasons for believing that. I actually have a fairly austere vetting process. It keeps superstition at bay, but suffice it to say, it was made known to me that actually happened. And so, from my perspective, I would disregard the people who are saying that this didn't happen. Okay. So it, Alien Interview may read like a grand space opera, and Lawrence Spencer, the author, clearly states that he was unable to corroborate much of the story. But it's very interesting to note the exponential increase of UFO activity after 1947 and the congruent commencement of nuclear weapon testing in New Mexico. Okay? So you got all of these things going on. You got the beginning of the nuclear age, fission fusion. You've got extraterrestrials. You've got the crash disk in Roswell. You've got Errol, the alien who was interviewed. And you get this kind of more literal definition of the fall because it's a repeat of the fall story. Okay, so the Luciferian fall in the mythos of the Abrahamic religions. In this version of the fall, we've been trapped in a cycle of amnesia in our reincarnation. We are held captive by what is called the evil empire, in her words, or not the evil empire, but the old empire. Surprisingly, she doesn't use qualitative words of moral origin. And you'll find all beings of high consciousness avoid that. I guess it's become because at a certain point you come to understand that everything happens for a reason, whether you like it or not. And so this 1947 is shaping up to be quite a year. Now, the supplemental footnotes in the addendum of Alien Interview cite numerous reports, affidavits, and eyewitness testimonies relating to the Roswell incident. Now, the NASA astronaut Neil Armstrong stated the aliens have a base on the dark side of the moon, and that the aliens warned them to get off and stay off the moon. Milton Cooper, Bill Cooper, a naval intelligence officer, not only confirms the moon base, but that the intelligence community named it Luna. Independent VHF receiving facilities, such as backyard ham radio operators, have intercepted messages which were bypassed by the NASA broadcasting outlets, stating that Apollo was directly observing spacecraft which were monitoring them. And then we get into the whole moon landing, okay? This is a very touchy subject. And it's interesting that there was a very recent, last week, Joe Rogan podcast in which he spoke with a man named, I just listened to it, so I'll give it to you. Hang on a sec here. Dribble was his name, I think, was his last name. Bart Sibrel, Sibrel, a filmmaker, writer, and investigative journalist. He's the director of the films A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon and Astronauts Gone Wild, an investigation into the authenticity of the moon landings, and author of the book Moon Man, the true story of a filmmaker on the CIA hit list. So the moon landing itself was faked. I don't think anybody can deny that. Whether we went to the moon with alien help is open for debate. And I've heard some very credible voices say that it really happened. So a lot of this stuff, if you can't directly apprehend it yourself intuitively or spiritually, you're really not going to know the answer. It's just too difficult to figure out. So whether we went to the moon or not is irrelevant. The moon landing was faked. I think everybody knows that. I mean, there are black and white films of, is it Richard Nixon, talking to the astronauts on a telephone. Well, how's that possible? We didn't have that technology back then. Okay? And as they say quite clearly, ham operators picked up signals. So the truth is, we're in space. We're much further than the moon. I think that we've gone outside of our solar system at this point. This is referred to as the secret space program. And there are stories out there that we have put humans on other planets or have been invited to be hosted on other planets. Project Serpico, I think, was one of the early ones where I think 11 or 12 humans went to another planet. I think half of them came back after 20 years and half stayed there. So this is real, okay? The people out there saying that, look, this is all demonic, it's not a suitable response to this circumstance. It's really just the projection of religious belief systems onto a phenomenon. Now, is the UFO phenomenon intermixed with negative entities? Absolutely. 100%, there's no doubt in my mind. And why do I say this? The characters involved, the people involved, the fact that the intelligence agency is involved. But I'm getting off point here. All of these narratives, which are just exploding now as the world goes to war for what is ostensibly the Third Temple of Solomon, interesting tie-in there. This fascination with space and extraterrestrials has reached a pitch now. Very, very big topic now. Why? Again, what I said in the last podcast, it bleeds into the savior complex. Somebody else is going to save us. The spiritual law is save yourself. Okay, you have to save yourself. You have to find it in yourself to escape the illusion you live within, begin to see reality, connect with the divine, connect to God, and slowly let that reality peel back the illusion for you. This is a universal truth in all religions: Sikhism, Buddhism, Taoism, Judaism, Christianity, Islam. Every religion has this core truth, which is that through inner work and commitment to your spiritual unfoldment, some, if not all, of this illusion can be lifted from you. I believe it's true. Okay? So, the expansion of the American space program began in earnest after the historic journey to the moon in 1969. Public opinion soared, and government funding of public money flowed into the coffers of NASA and contracted civilian business interests, which focused on jet propulsion systems and electronic technology. Humanity was enamored with space, and true to Gene Roddenberry's slogan, it really seemed to become the final frontier. How naive. If anything, it became a new frontier for science and technocracy. But space travel became beleaguered with failure. Rockets exploded, space shuttles disintegrated, and astronauts died. Money evaporated as quickly as the rocket fuel out of those booster rocket engines. Future spending was reinvested into the development of computing. Silicon Valley, the internet, communication, social media, supersonic flight, and new weaponry. One thing for certain is that every space flight which humanity undertook was not a giant leap for mankind, but a metaphoric casting of breadcrumbs which left a trail for any extraterrestrial race to follow back to our home planet. Every time we went into space, we brought something else back with us, and every nuclear weapon detonation was a scalar beacon pulsing throughout the time and space fish pond, advertising our presence and our infantile propensity to dominate, control, and kill each other. The Oppenheimer narrative, recently depicted by the brilliant Christopher Nolan in his similarly named film, Oppenheimer, is pure fiction. The Nazis built the bombs that are alleged to have been dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They were secured after the German surrender. They originally had New York and Los Angeles painted on their respective sides. The U.S. military painted over the city names. If the theory that nuclear explosions summoned otherworldly things to our frequency of reality is true, then it stands to reason that out of self-interest they would begin to investigate by sending scout ships first, which is exactly what the ship in Roswell was. This is not to say that extraterrestrials have not always been a part of the human experience, but in the past it had been more to do with inception races and guardian races and exploitative races who had been clandestinely interacting with the human race for as long as the human race had been on this planet. Now, this is something which would have been known only to small handfuls of people on the planet, extremely advanced souls incarnated here on spiritual missions, certain secret societies who worked with alchemical or spiritual texts from bygone times, and the generational holders of the secrets of Egypt, Babylon, Sumeria, Persia, and other antiquated societies, which had openly interacted with races from other dimensions or other parts of this time and space we call our gravity, our galaxy, and universe. Now, the extraterrestrial movement has spawned a significant debate in the human race, with a contingent of people, religious leaning, who would have us believe that these extraterrestrials are in fact demons, practicing the demonic craft of deception for the acquisition of immortal souls. This is in some measure true. The spiritual realm can trick us, but they are not demons per se, just non-physical tricksters amusing themselves for no more gain than that, like adolescent boys ringing doorbells and running away or lighting off firecrackers. This is a good time to quote Shakespeare when Hamlet says to Horatio, on the appearance of the ghost of Hamlet's father, to which Horatio finds himself in a cognitive dissonance, "There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy." All due respect to the Bible, literal and ignorant utility of its verses redacts relationship with the divine, when the purpose of spiritual practice is to increase relationship with the divine. But we can't dismiss entirely the foray by the tin roof evangelical into the melee. There is something spiritually fishy about the extraterrestrial movement. There's a very strange character to the early days of rocket science, the corollary to the fusion and fission that creates the bomb. The bomb is useless if it can't be delivered. One of the main figures in these scientific advancements was Jack Parsons. He was also a Thelemite occultist, the system founded by Aleister Crowley. He was also known as the Beast and the wickedest man in the world. What a strange pastime for such a brilliant man. Parsons was intent on manifesting the Antichrist on Earth. In early atomic bomb testing, he and his colleagues placed an infant inside a lead case within proximity of the bomb test site, and this was their crude formula to bring in the Antichrist. Don't ask me to explain it, it's as batshit crazy as it sounds. The salient question is, why are these people doing this? And more specifically, why is there so much dark religion associated with NASA, the characters of the time, and this zeitgeist throughout World War II? Do you know who else was deep into the occult? Yeah, you guessed it, the Nazis. Hitler and his inner circle, the upper management in the SS, were steeped in ritual and magic. So, where did everybody learn all this magic? And if these people took it seriously, and they were very scientifically rational, why isn't this a larger phenomenon in our society? I don't know. To understand how we arrived at this chaotic mess, we have to go back and correct some errors. There really is no such thing as Jewish religious tradition. Okay? There, I said it. Some people are going to hate that, but it is the truth. The tribes that associate themselves with Judaic tradition were scattered across that region of the world. Egypt was the center of what we might call mysticism, but even that isn't the correct word, because mysticism denotes a connection with God. And I'm not sure that the Egyptians had a connection with God. They were certainly multidimensional people, and they were certainly versed in portals and magic and manifestation. This can't be denied. This is why the Western secret societies are fascinated with Egypt. Egypt represents the last bit of consciousness associated with the age before the one we're in now, which is the Iron Age, or as I like to call it, the Ironic Age. The term Israel represents a conglomerate of tribes. It never really existed. There were a number of tribes that remained in the Near East, mainly the Canaanites, the Assyrians, and a few others. They went to Egypt. They were not taken there as slaves. That is a historical lie. So in a period of time, the patriarch we know as Jacob went to Egypt with his son Joseph. The Torah tells us that he was kidnapped because his brothers betrayed him. The historical reality is he married the daughter of the chief high priest of Egypt. And Joseph became the prime minister of Egypt, a high figure that led into all the esoteric teachings of the Egyptians. These teachings were basically appropriated and coded into the Torah, but coded in a way that they are almost completely inaccessible in the modern age. The Kabbalah has been able to decode a lot of it, but not all of it. And so the Jews don't even understand the technology they have. That's the simple truth of it. And here we are again, 1947, just after World War II, back to the Nazis and Zionists, the two polarities of the atom from hell, both intent on splitting the atom. The Nazis succeeding the Zionist forces, what history calls the Allies, stealing it from them in the form of 2 pre-built bombs and dropping them on the Japanese civilians. And the guy they gave credit for this, in a brilliant Edward Bernays-style spin, was Oppenheimer, who was Jewish. You might be wondering why I'm skipping over Einstein, another Jew and a German to boot. He is the ultimate Zionist public relations victory, and really little more than a plagiarist, fraud, and poster boy for the campaign for the chosen people. Magic relates to the manipulation of time and space. It can deal with predictions, manifestations, curses, and the application of extreme psychological and psychic stress upon another human being. Call it a curse or call it what you will. These things are generally done from the 4th dimension, and many cultures on the planet have figured out how to do it. In polite modern society, we don't talk about these things, and we've relegated them to superstition. Big mistake. It was a mistake on the part of the general populace, but it was the intended outcome of the architects of the Industrial Revolution. Anybody who wants to control humanity has to first suppress the natural consciousness of humanity, which is multidimensional by nature and able to see through many things. The suppression of consciousness is done through socialization. You teach the parents teach the children teach the grandchildren, and after a certain number of generations, the lie gets embedded or hard-coded into the genetic line of the culture. Thought affects our DNA. This is why the key to unlocking the secrets of reality are done through meditation in the Eastern systems. The absence of thought and the accessing of higher energies illuminate and reset the DNA so that we can think and feel in different ways. And most importantly, think and feel on more than one dimension. This is the secret of secrets. This is the hidden treasure of all the secret societies. It's all the same thing. Our Western system has been a hack and a con since day one. Whatever multidimensional consciousness we have in the West is the product of stolen Egyptian magic masquerading as Jewish mysticism. And then there's Moses. Moses was not a Jew. He was a blood-born Egyptian, a disciple and priest taught by the Egyptian priestcraft, and this explains the great mystery of the Temple of Solomon. Its construction was as mysterious as the construction of the pyramids. More interesting is the idea that the first temple never existed, nor did Solomon, the most revered of the non-prophetic Jews, as he was not a prophet, he was a king. And the inclusion of his material in some Christian religions, the Song of Solomon, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, is more a cultural window into the early Jewish state before the destruction of the temple and the captivity. Solomon is revered by Freemasons, the secret society commenced by Jews in the 17th century in England, culminating in the London and Scottish Grand Lodges in the early 18th century. And so this was the beginning of the public teaching or the dissemination of the Kabbalah, and the rabbis confirm this. It started about 400 years ago, so that would have been 1624. And they chose very selectively who they would share it with. And these people who study the Kabbalah through another name, whether it be Freemasonry, Rosicrucianism, Martinism, or any of the Western secret societies, if they adhere to the system of study, they are what the Jews call righteous Gentiles, meaning a monkey that can behave like them. Sorry, but I like to minimize things. It just makes everything so much easier to understand. Okay? Now, many accomplished contemporary black magicians like Tim Riffat, R-I-F-A-T, you might want to look him up. I don't think he's posted in quite a while, but he had a YouTube channel for quite a while. He was a European black magician trained in the Rothschild family, okay? And then he turned on them. And these people who turn, whether they genuinely turn or not, they're incredible information sources. They give us windows into what's going on in these worlds, okay? And they're very important. And things that happen like that are part of, let's call it, the divine outcome, meaning that they were, in many ways, meant to happen, okay? So Riffat was last known to live in Vietnam, the result of running afoul of MI6 and the CIA, and he claims the real Kabbalah was never given to the Gentiles, and that the version given to non-Jews is ineffective and dangerous. Just like the Nazis, the Jews identify by blood and genetics. So, to my friends out there who have entered into Freemasonic lodges and you've gone beyond the third initiation, the Blue Lodge initiation, realize you're being slow-fed poison. You're being slow-fed poison. You should just get away from that material and, quite frankly, to use a word I don't often use, repent. Repent. Okay? Now, one of the most curious things to come about from 1947 was a woman, though even that designation could be debated, by the name of Cynthia Crawford. I first came across her when I wrote Stardust Ranch, The Incredible True Story in 2019. My co-author and the steward of Stardust Ranch, John Edmonds, told me the story of Cynthia. Now, before I get into this, I'm going to show you a little Cynthia. Here you go. Note the sculptures. Okay, so that is the Cynthia Crawford story briefly introduced. And Cynthia is dead now. She died in 2017. And one of the last people that she met with before she passed was John Edmonds of Stardust Ranch. And 2 days after her visit with John Edmonds, she passed away. But she wanted to visit John Edmonds. Now, those of you who've read Stardust Ranch and you're familiar with Dr. Brandy Howe, and that incredible confrontation that happened with the purple lightning bolt and everything, that was all set up by Cynthia. Cynthia contacted Brandy to see if she could clean out the ranch. And it's a very interesting story. Now, the question is, who is Cynthia Crawford? And that is a very interesting question. Cynthia was created in 1947 by the mixing of human and alien DNA. Her father had been a member of the Office of Strategic Services, the OSS, the progenitor of the CIA. Cynthia visited John at the ranch in Arizona around 2017, as I said, and she had also been living in Arizona, yet they had never met, despite both of them having exposure in the world of exopolitics. She stayed at the ranch for 3 days, and John told me that they felt related in a cosmic sense. And as I said, 2 days after leaving Stardust Ranch, Cynthia died of the brain tumor. Now, she knew she was dying. One of the last things she did before leaving the world was visit John at Stardust Ranch. Now, Cynthia Crawford took a public role in the American exopolitics movement, speaking at conferences and fulfilling a step-by-step mission, as she described it, because her full mission was withheld from her. And this, she said, was because if she had known her full mission too early, she might have failed. And then for those of you who understand why you're not seeing the future and you can't do what all these people can do who have gone and, and have these psychic abilities and stuff, maybe it's not for you, okay? And having your psychic centers open is no picnic. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, okay? But there's reasons for the consciousness we have. And oftentimes those reasons are to fulfill a very specific mission in a lifetime. And Cynthia claimed that she had just such a mission, okay? What one immediately notices is the almost religious language. It's a one-to-one match. If she claimed she was being led by angels, it would have been a prophetic mission rather than galactic. And there's the thing to note. In this year of 1947, we get the seeds of a transition or a translation, but the language itself is not changing. It's all English. The translation is from the mythopoetic language, the language of Scripture, to a more literal language, from angels and demons to good and bad extraterrestrials and intradimensionals, beings who come from other places and times. Like angels and demons, the event when experienced is largely internal, but there can be external phenomenon. In the Bible, angelic forces often come in dreams or an internal mystical experience, as do most extraterrestrial experiences. The difference being, there is no doubt about the extraterrestrial experience. The contactees know where the extraterrestrials come from, their star system and planet, the number of light years away, and very often they are told that they are spiritual members of the race in contact. Abductions are another story. In the religious analogy, they are more demonic. Now, I'm not going to rehash the whole topic here. I mean, Carla Turner's Masquerade of Angels really can't be improved upon. So if you want to know more about that, get a copy of Carla Turner's Masquerade of Angels and read it. She was a brilliant thinker. She had a PhD in English literature. Now, the thing which Cynthia became known for, her legacy, if you will, is sculpture. Cynthia was able to interpret the star family that an incarnate human being came from, the extraterrestrial seed race of which they were a member. Now, the exopolitics narrative suggests that all human beings originated somewhere else and are part of another galactic race and were sent to this planet to incarnate once or many times. Now, the service she provided was a sculpture of their race, usually a bust, and it came with directions. The recipient, upon receiving the sculpture by courier, was to sleep with it for the first few nights. Subsequent to the publishing of Stardust Ranch, The Incredible True Story, 3 people found their way to me after reading the book. 3 people who had received a bust at the cost of several $1,000s. All of the stories I heard were horrible. 2 were something akin to the phenomenon in a movie called Insidious, a successful Hollywood horror franchise focusing on demonic botherings. Now, both of these people had to destroy their sculptures after the first week. Now, the third and final recipient has been a friend for several years now. And not only did he receive a sculpture, he was also a visitor to Stardust Ranch and a friend of John Edmonds. As an added bonus, he was Indian by ethnicity and British by upbringing. So we shared a common language rooted in meditation and Indian spiritual concepts. Now, he is the holder of 3 degrees from Oxford, one of which is a medical degree, though he no longer practices as a doctor. His experience with the sculpture was quite extraordinary. On the first night he slept with it, he woke and went to the end of the bed to have a 2-hour conversation with his mother, which might not sound that extraordinary except for the fact that his mother had been dead for years. Subsequent to that, he had health problems. Unlike the other 2 recipients of the sculptures I spoke with, he did not destroy or discard his in the first week out of sheer terror, largely due to the positive experience with his mother. The security apparatus that evolved out of, well, you know what? Let's just stop there today at Cynthia. So, Cynthia was created in a test tube. So where did the OSS get alien DNA? Okay. Now, most of the hybrid stories you hear now, it's more like the alien consciousness coming in to share the body with you and sort of being your mentor voice. This is the way it's being sold to us. But again, I think any violation of consciousness space is without consent is just that, a violation. So we'll leave there for today, and I am Bruce McDonald, and this has been the Talamanca Review, and we'll do another bit of 1947 tomorrow.